Hello, good morning to everybody present here. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good morning once again. Good morning, Chandra sir.
Good morning, sir.
Very good morning. So, welcome all participants for our second day session, and this is the first session of second day. So we have completed successfully the first day sessions, and this is the second day session, first session of second day. So our respected speaker, Dr. Chandra Prakash, is with us. So we will start very soon. Around 56 participants is already joined, and hopefully others will be joined slowly. So because time is already delayed with the 5 minutes. So Dr. Chandra Prakash is currently working as assistant professor in NIT Delhi. Dr. Chandra Prakash is 2010 alumni of Indian Institute of Information Technology and Management, Gwalior. From there, he pursued BTech and MTech in Information Technology. Dr. Prakash received the PhD degree in Machine Learning from Malviya National Institute of Technology, Jaipur in 2018. Prior to NIT Delhi, he served in Department of Information Technology, Indira Gandhi Delhi Technical University, New Delhi. Dr. Prakash has teaching and research experience is all about 10 years. His area of interest are artificial intelligence, machine learning, reinforcement learning, motion analysis, gait analysis in healthcare, biometric, and natural language processing. Dr. Prakash has one patent and authored more than 37 publications in referred journals, book chapters, and conferences. He is a recipient of the scholarship as Junior Research Fellow, JRF in this DST funded project, the Lord of the Code Scholarship from Red Hat and the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai. So let us welcome Dr. Chandra Prakash. And Dr. Chandra Prakash, this floor is yours. So you can start now your presentation. And I request all participants, please mute your mic and be attentive. And whatever that sir will deliver, let's learn each and every person. Thank you, Dr. Chandra Prakash, sir. Please proceed.
Thank you, sir, for the introduction. Let me share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Is it visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay. So today I will talk about the unsupervised learning in medical field of motion analysis. Motion analysis in medical term is known as the gait analysis. Gait is basically the way a particular person walk, right? Because it has a lot of scope. If you, the most common example of the gait is that let's say if the at night if somebody is going in front of you, right? So if you are unable to see the face of that particular person, but by looking at the gait, we can identify who that particular person is. And in today's corona situation, gait recognition is also of great importance. By looking at that, we can say, okay, this particular person has reached office or not, and likewise. It can be used as a biometric as well. Okay. So in this particular FDP, you would be have encountered with the different machine learning and AI terminologies, right? Robots, deep learning, optimizations. So let's see what this AI is. In starting, then we will talk about the various type of the machine learning technique. In that, unsupervised learning is there.
Am an explorer. Searching for the origins of our universe. And charting a safer path to other worlds. I am moving us
This is Git application.
All these are some of the applications AI. Right. Okay. So let's talk about this particular slide first. So what do you see in this slide? Any volunteer?
Someone playing guitar.
Yes, someone playing guitar. What about the second part?
Some numeric numbers are there.
Some numeric
Addition.
numbers are there, right? Addition. But we can solve this, but surely it will take some time. But as a human, we are very much comfortable with the first task, recognizing the humans and their activity in this particular image, right? We can also identify that how many persons are there in this, even though there are some person whose little part or hand is visible only, right? Still we are able to identify that there are 8 or 9% in this image, right? So we try to take the benefit of the computers that they are good in the computations, and we are telling them, we are trying to learn them so that they are also good in the other activities as the human are in the computer vision format or in the medical fields, let's say. Right. So machine learning is a way of designing and development of the algorithm so that my system can learn from the data and can process something good out of it. Right. That data may come from the some sensor or some database. So my aim is that I want to teach my robot this guitar. Playing guitar is very tedious task because you need to apply right amount of the force on the string, otherwise they will break, right? So in machine learning, what we do, we try to learn the pattern based on the given data. We try to predict the inherent patterns in that, and then with time we try to improve that. Right. Now the question is, can we recognize these pictures? Yes, of course we can. This second image is of parliament, right? And what about this first? It's an image or it's a sculpture? Yes.
An image which consists of sculpture.
It's an image in the form of sculpture. If somebody asks that if it's a sculpture, then uh, where did you see that? So the answer is known to you only if you have past experience of this particular sculpture. Right? It's Lal Bagcha Badshah from Mumbai. So the question is how we recognize all these things. And the simple answer is that we recognize those things which have experience of, past experience of, right? So throughout our life, we try to learn new things. So this learning is a kind of modifying or constructing the representation in our brain in such a way so that we can correlate it with the past experience. Right? For example, this white cat, it tried to mimic the behavior of this another brown cat, right? So understand that whenever this another cat rings the bell, another person or in computer term, the external environment feed that particular cat, right? Feed means she got some rewards, right? Then she tried to mimic that particular behavior. So from surrounding, we also try to do so. So that is actually our learning. So in case of machine learning, there are three types of the learning basically based on the feedback from the learner, feedback to the learner from the external environment. It is your supervised learning. In case of supervised learning, we have the data set with us. In that, for every particular data, we have a corresponding output. Label data is there. So this is also known as task driven. And now in supervised learning, there are two tasks. One is I need to classify a given particular task, right? Classify means I need to identify that this belongs to class 1, class 2, class 3 likewise. And second is the regression task. So these are the two tasks that are very common in the supervised learning. In case of regression, we try to identify a particular numerical value. Right? Let's say the banker want to give a loan to a particular person or not. So based on some features, right, it try to identify whether that particular person is eligible for the loan or not. Now, how much amount we can give to that particular person, that is part of regression. And in classification, we try to solve this question, that whether that particular person is eligible or not for a loan. In unsupervised learning, the data we have in that there is no labeling, because certain time when we talk about the medical field, so the labeling was not there in that. So we take some help of an expert, and if we want to take the help of the machine learning, then we try to find some inherent parameters within the data set. So it is also known as data driven, and based on that we try to group that data into some clusters. Now we need to decide in advance that what should be the number of the clusters or group that we want to work on. The third is the reinforcement learning. This is very close to the human learning, because over here the way we learn from our own experience, right? That experience may be positive or negative. So in technical term, these experience can be termed as the rewards, right? Positive reward or negative reward. So it's kind of self-learning. So in case of supervised learning, as I told you, that the data will be given to you, along with that the correct label will be there, right? Then we try to predict a function f such that when we apply the, or when we give the training data to it, it model in such a way so that it always give the output as labeled output, that is, let's say apple, tomato, cow, horse, cat, whatever in your data set is. Right. So this is another example of supervised learning technique where I am having some data and this is the label data. Right. It is task driven. So my task is to classify a given object or a given image or a given problem, new data sample into car and motorcycle, so that I can generate, I can develop a model, and whenever a new test image is given to me, I can classify it whether it's a car or motorcycle. And there are various supervised learning techniques. Linear regression is there, logistic regression is there, perceptron, neural network, your KNN, SVM, decision tree, for random forest. All these are example of the supervised learning. But actually in real time, this is how our data is, right? Either the data is not available, or if it is available, then it is not in the format on which we can directly work. So the question is how to proceed in this case, right? So what we do, we try to find some inherent property, hidden property within this data itself. So what we may be the procedure now, how we can proceed in this? So what we can do, we can group the given data set based on the shape, based on the color also. So nobody tells me that I need to divide this data or I need to group this data based on shape and color. From my own practice, I realized that these are the two inherent property that I can take benefit of. Right. So in case of unsupervised learning, unlabeled data is there. And then based on the similar structure, inherent property, we try to cluster them, we try to make groups. So in this particular same example, we have grouped in two ways. Right. So group A is your car, group B is your motorcycle. The interesting part in unsupervised learning is that next time when I will run my code, my group A may contain motorcycle and group B may contain the cars. So I cannot assign a label to group A and group B. I always need some expert with me, right? So let's say I need to work on the cancer data image. Now, in that, by looking at the shape of the cell, right, I have divided that into two parts. So I can say that the first is the healthy one and second is the unhealthy one. But I cannot assign that this group A is always healthy and group B is unhealthy. Maybe possible next time when I run this my algorithm again, it may change. So I need to take the help of an expert in that case. The third type of the learning is the reinforcement learning. So in that, certain rewards are given to your action, and based on that action, you try to identify uh, how good or bad your particular action is. And then correspondingly, we see that we achieve our goal or not. So reinforcement learning is based on your feedback, and feedback is accumulated through the interaction with the external environment in the form of rewards, right? So the example of the reinforcement learning is the study time also, or bicycle learning. Uh, in childhood, the way we learn, right? If you perform some good activity, then you good some good reward for it. If you perform some bad thing, then correspondingly uh, you may get some warning, right? You may get some higher warning, and फिर भी आप नहीं मान रहे, then you get a tight slap. So all these are example of the rewards from the external environment, and according to that we adjust our parameters, right? So this is reinforcement learning. So let's talk about unsupervised learning. So in unsupervised learning, the data has no target attributes, as we discussed. Now, based on some hidden structure, inherent property from the unlabeled data, or we try to identify some intrinsic structure within the data so that we can group them. Now, where this can be used, it can be used for automatically organizing the data. At least I can segregate that this belongs to one group, this belongs to another group. Understanding the hidden structure in the data, pre-processing for further analysis. So it may act as your pre-processing step in some of the medical field applications. Right. So in unsupervised learning, what we try to find, this hidden structure, right? So in one sense, we try to use the latent factors in the data so that we can find the relationship between the data and the task, right? For example, if this is my data set, now I need to group them. So first thing is I need to identify how many group I can form in this, or what should be the number of the clusters in it. So one way is that I can take the help of the literature, or I can consult some experts, and then once I have fixed that the number of the group is 3 in this, so correspondingly I can group my data, right? So this latent variable that I talk about over here are the variables that are not directly observed, but they can be inferred from some other variables. Right. For example, if we talk about the deep learning also, so or neural network, so the first layer in that, in case of neural network, let's say I have identified that what should be the price of a particular, I need to identify what should be the price of a house, right? So for that, I human engineered features, I have extracted something, size, room size, number of the bed, zip code, and what is the overall locality wealth, district wealth, something like that. Now the hidden layers, what they does, they try to uh, find that inherent parameter, right? So we didn't consider the family size, but maybe possible that this room size and the number of the bed can contribute to this parameter, that is the family size. Your number of the bedroom, zip code can be contribute to some other parameter, walkability, school quality, and likewise. So these all are latent variable in one way, right? So there is a famous allegory by the Plato, allegory of the cave. It says that uh, what we always see is not what actually that particular object is, right? So we try to find the actual parameters, the hidden parameters that actually construct that particular object. So unsupervised learning, we can divide into three parts: clustering based method, dimensionality reduction methods, and association based methods. Clustering is mainly in this particular session, I will talk about the clustering algorithms. So it's a task of grouping a set of object in such a way so that the object that lie within that particular same group or cluster are moreover similar to each other, right? The way we make our groups as a human, right? So our friends are those whose liking and disliking are similar to us. So that is the inherent property that we try to see, and based on that, we try to make some group. So clusters are similar to one another within the same cluster, but they are dissimilar to the objects in the another cluster. And it is an unsupervised classification because there is no predefined classes there. The applications is the pre-processing step for some other algorithm, as we discussed. Right. So the goal of the clustering is to group the data point that are similar to each other. So let's say in this particular figure, we can make different groups, right? But broadly, by looking at this, we can say that it lie or there are three groups in it. If I go deeper, then if I say that, let's say over here, total 9 objects are there, 9 samples are there. So I can also say that there are 9 clusters in it. That is also correct. So depending on my application, I need to identify that what should be the number of the clusters in it. So when we are having the high dimensional data, we try to find some interesting patterns in it, and clustering is a good way to start in these type of the problems. And it can be used for the marketing, for the insurance based companies, where we can identify, we can make some groups of the person whom we can call later on, so that there are more probability that they will buy that particular insurance. for in case it can be used for the urban planning, in case of the medical. Right, so clustering follow the feature extraction part. Then once we have these feature with us, then we try to find the similarity in that. Then after that, we try to group them. So now the question is, when should we apply these clustering based methods? Right, because it should not be like that ki I am having some data with me and I know clustering approach or X approach. I directly start working on it. I should first understand the nature of the data, and then based on the nature of the data, we try to see which particular machine learning technique I can apply on, right? So if I want to apply the clustering techniques, so the first condition should be scalability of the data. Data must be scalable, otherwise it may give some wrong result. It should be able to deal with different type of the attributes, right? And it should also deal with the arbitrary shape of the clusters. It should not be like that. There should be a simple straight line in that. The clustering approach, they are very much sensitive to the noise, right? So I should also try to see that my model should be insensitive to the noise and outliers or input records. And it should also be able to deal with the data set of high dimensionality. High dimensionality means if I'm having features, for example, the data, that example that we consider for finding the rate of a particular house or flat. So in that we consider only 4 or 5 features, but if I am having more than 100 features in a particular problem, for example, when we deal with the problem of the diabetic related patients, so we know that there are few parameters that are commonly known to the general person, but common person, but the expert says that there are a lot of other parameters. So the dataset, if you find it on the UCI repository or other repositories online, so some of these dataset have thousands or hundreds of records, right? So we need to see how to deal with this such high dimensional data. So based on that data set, we try to find that similarity. Now that similarity, if it is high within the class, or it should have high intra-class similarity, means the group that we are forming, our friends group. So in that, our likes and dislikes are very much common. And if I talk about the similarity or liking and disliking of some other group, then in that case, that is minimum. So the property of the good clustering method is that within the group, it should have high intra-cluster, right? So it means it should be compact within the group. And if I talk about the inter-class similarity, then it should be as low as possible. Now, if we talk about the cluster quality, it is very difficult to define because it may depend on the application. It is very subjective as well. So now what may be the similarity measures as we talk over here, this inter-cluster similarity. So in case of the clustering, we try to find some similarity, right? So that similarity, there should be some parameter for it to measure, to judge the similarity. So the one way is the distance. Right. So based on the distance between the 2 points, we can say the smaller is the distance, the more similar the objects are. Right. So there are different type of the distance measures. Manhattan distance is there, Euclidean distance is there, Minkowski distance is there. Beside this, in out of these, equivalent distance is commonly used as the similarity measures. Beside distance, we can also find the distance in term of the correlation. Correlation distance is there. Cosine similarity I can also identify. See? Now using different measures for clustering can yield different cluster. It means that if I am using a different cluster, I am using I have applied at let's say Minkowski distance, or I have applied the uh, Manhattan distance, then or cosine distance, then the output will be different for all these type of the measures, similarity measures. So in clustering, we can divide into the hierarchical partitioning, model based or density based. In hierarchical, we try to form a dendrogram or a hierarchy where my nodes represent a subset of S. Right? It is similar to a tree, and based on the similarity, first we try to group the two objects, then these two group make one form one group, and then so let's say these are the two groups that are having highest interclass similarity. Then we try to find some other particular data point which has the similar which is very close to this group now. So likewise, in case of hierarchical clustering, the data object are obtained by cutting the dendrograms at a desired level. So if I want that there should be 5 clusters in it, so I can divide from here. So this is one group, this is another group, this is third group, fourth and fifth group likewise. So based on this distance matrix, we can identify that. And it can be divided into two parts again, algorithmic approach, bottom up approach. So we start with the individual objects in it, and then we try to merge the different groups together so that at the end we can achieve a root, or we can merge all of them. While in case of divisive, it is also known as the top down, where we move from a single data set. We consider that all the data points, they belongs to one group, and then we subdivide them based on their interest or based on their inherent property. Right. So if we try our hierarchical clustering on this data set, then what we do, these are the different distance between the different cities, right? So we try to find the minimum distance first. So the minimum distance is between TO and MI, let's say. Then based on that, we form one group, right? Now, after that, we merge these two based on the similarity. Now they act as a single group, and then we see that the next similar group is of RM and NA, and likewise we try to group them. So the best part of the hierarchical clustering is that it give you a great view for visualization purpose, and it also provide the hierarchical relationship between the clusters. It shows to be able to capture some concentric cluster methods, clustering, but time complexity is high. It is not scalable. If I am having large number of thousands or lakhs of such data set, then time complexity is an issue in this case. It's not an easy to define the level of the clusters. It's always not easy to define the number of the clusters. So people are working on this problem. So this is an open area where you can also contribute that what should be the optimal number of the clusters for a given data set. We also try to apply, we try to find the optimal number of the clusters on this gate data set. So at the end, we will talk about that as well. The another type of the clustering approach is the partitioning algorithm, where in the advance we need to tell that what should be the size of the clusters, right? Now, based on that, we try to divide our whole data set into those corresponding groups. So there are various variant of it, and the very common form, or we call the clustering as the K-mean. It is very popular. It was proposed somewhere in 1967, but it is still applicable today in most of the applications. In that, what we try to do, we try to find the center of the cluster of each group, and then based on that centroid, we try to identify the close data point to that. The variant in that is the k-meanoid, where in k-mean we are trying that centroid is basically the mean of the different data points. But in case of k-meanoid, it's the actual data object within the cluster near to that centroid. Right, so in k-mean, the first assumption or the first requirement is we should know the number of the cluster in advance, the k. Once I know the number of the clusters, then I can choose randomly the data points as a cluster. Let's say I am having 2 clusters only. I need to divide my data into 2 clusters. So the number of the centroid in that will be 2. And one way is that I can start with any point as a centroid. Then we try to measure the distance between the centroid and the other objects. Just a second. I'm in class. Hello? Yes, sorry. So once I have assigned the similarity of all the objects with respect to that centroid, then based on the number of the group, I can divide my clusters or my data points into 2 groups. And I keep on repeating till all I reach stopping criteria. That stopping criteria may be your minimum error, right? So again, it's an open area, open research problem that what should be the criteria, stopping criteria for the clustering algorithm. So people have used the different optimization algorithm in it, so that we can find the best possible value of initial centroids so that it can converge faster, right? It should able to achieve some local optimal instead of the global optimal. So let's try to solve one real-time problem for k-mean. So in this, I need to divide these medicines. There are 4 medicines for as a training data. and they have two attributes, attribute 1 and attribute 2. Attribute 1, let's say, is your weight index or pH. So as we suggest that we need to find some parameters, right? So we have to see that what should be the inherent parameter that we can use for this. Over here, these two parameters are given to you. Now, based on this, I need to apply a k-mean clustering on it, right? So the first step is I have to divide the find the value of k. So I have identified the value of k as 2, right? Now we need to initialize the centroid. So there will be 2 centroid in it, right? So these are my data point, and let's say I consider the first 2 data point as my centroid. This is my assumption. This is the way I am using over here. You can also assign these centroid randomly. Then I have to identify the distance between all the data point and that centroid, right? So I formulate a distance matrix for it. Now I have formulated this distance matrix, and based on this, whichever is the smaller value, I will assign it to that particular group based on the distance. So for example, the distance of this particular data point with cluster 1 is 0. So it belongs to group 1. Likewise, in this case, this should belongs to group 2. The minimum values over here, so it should also belongs to group 2. This should also belongs to group 2. So one data point, the first data point belongs to group 1, and the rest belongs to group 2. Right, so this is how we can make a group matrix as well. Now again, because over here there is only one object in the group 1, so if I choose my centroid again, it will be on the same point. But now earlier my centroid was over here at the second data point, but now I am having these 3 objects with me. So overall I need to calculate the mean again, or the centroid again. So it will come somewhere here, right? So I have to repeat this process again. I need to again identify the distance of this object with respect to this centroid 2, the distance of object 3 with respect to centroid 2, the distance of object 4 with respect to centroid 2. So again, I identify the distance from here, and again I assign to a particular group, right? So this again belongs to group 1. Now earlier this data point belongs to group 2, but now this value is 1, which is smaller than the second group. The distance is smaller than the second second distance. So this belongs to group 1 now, right? So I have to repeat this process again and again till it reaches the stopping criteria. So the stopping criteria may be that after 5 or 10 iteration or 50 iteration, the value of the center does not change. This may be one of the criteria. Another may be I should be able to reach to a particular minimum square error, right? So when I repeat this once again, then again the group formulation is similar. Data point 1 and data point 2, they belongs to group 1, and data point 2, 3 and 4, they belongs to group 2, right? So after once it got saturated, then I can say that this is my final grouping structure. This is my clustering final data, final result. So now I can say that this medicine A and medicine B, they belongs to one group, and medicine 3, C and D, they belong to another group. So this is the simplest example that I can take in this case. Now, the larger the data set we have, the more complex is that problem is. Okay. Uh, One assumption over here is that I have to identify the value of k in advance, right? So it has very this limitation that I should know what should be the value of k before actually working on it. The best part of the simplicity of the k-mean is that it is efficient. The complexity is of order tkn, where k is your number of the clusters and t is the number of the iteration, and n is the number of the objects. It often at a local optimal, so we can use the some optimization algorithms to identify this first uh, step, that is identify the clusters head or the centroid. Now, but the limitation, as I told you, that I need to identify the number of the k in it, and it is very sensitive to noise and outlier data. So we should explore some other method for it. It is not suitable for the non-convex shapes as well. If you want to solve the problem that we discussed just then in Python, you can use the sklearn library, and this is the syntax of it. You can apply, you can decide the number of the clusters in it, then you can apply the type of the clustering in it. These are the two parameters that you can apply, and then it will make some groups for you. The limitations of the k-mean is that it is very hard bounded. Means after a particular threshold, it belongs to another group or in the first group. So all these hierarchical k-mean, all these, they are hard clustering approaches. But in real time, it may be possible that a particular data point initially lie in group A, then gradually it shifted to group B. For example, when we talk about the medical related results, right? So based on walking, if I identify that this particular person is having some abnormality, and I perform some, the expert perform some operations on that particular person, surgery, then it is not like that on the next day itself they belongs to the healthy group, right? So there is a gradual shift from the unhealthy to the healthy one. So to overcome such limitations, we have to use the some soft clustering approaches. Fuzzy C-mean is an example of a soft approach. In this, we assign each data point a degree of membership that says that what is the belongingness of that particular point in that cluster. In this approach, each element of a data point belongs to all the clusters with certain fuzzy membership. So earlier, in case of the k-mean approach, we were having this type of the representation where either it belongs to a group or it not belongs to that group. But in case of Epstein, fuzzy C-mean, it has a specific degree of membership, right? So by looking at a particular or by setting a particular threshold, we can say that this data point belongs to group A or group B, right? So these are the uh, outcomes when we apply the fuzzy seaming on our data set. So you can see that over here, each data point has certain membership value in one of these groups. And based on my threshold, I can decide that it should belongs to group A, B, C, or D. Right. So initially, we in this also we try to calculate a matrix U that actually tells that what should be my center vectors, and then I calculate the membership of all the data points with respect to that cluster. Then I keep on repeating this task. The option that I can select, it belongs to which particular group. So it allow a data point to be in multiple clusters. It is a more natural representation of the data, where one particular data point can lie in multiple groups. Again, the issue is similar to the k-mean, that we need to identify the number of the clusters in advance, and what should be the membership cutoff value, that also we need to determine. So using these clustering approaches, let's say I have divided my data set into some groups. Now the question is that arises is that how valid that particular clusters is, because over here we cannot use the evaluation parameter as accuracy, right? So some data point is given to you. Any clustering algorithm can generate the clusters. Now, how to know that this clustering results is valid and meaningful? The measuring of the validity of the cluster result usually involve the optimality of the cluster and verification of the biological meaning of the cluster, right? So we need an expert in this. For supervision methods, as I told you, that we can use the different evaluation parameter to identify how good or bad that particular model is. So we can use the accuracy, precision, and recall. But this is not as simple in case of the cluster based applications, because it all depend on the goodness of the resulting cluster. So from us some given scenario, as we can infer many things based on our background, similar to that we can divide the same data point into different groups. So we have to find, so it says that clusters are in the eyes of the beholder. So we need to see that what should be the best way to evaluate these clustering approaches, so that we can avoid we can avoid finding patterns in the noise. We can compare the clustering algorithms, and we can compare two set of the clusters as well, how good or bad that particular cluster is with respect to the another approach, right? So so if we look back, so based on the inherent property, that was that within the cluster it should have high uh, or you can say within the cluster it should have minimum distance, right? We call that as an intra-cluster distance. And distance between the two cluster points, it should be maximum, so we call it as a intra-cluster distance, right? So one of the criteria may be that you should have a minimum inter-cluster distance and maximum intra-cluster distance. Now, based on this intra-cluster measures, we can have the square error, and that can help me to decide that what should be the number of the clusters. Because, for example, if this is the data set, that I can divide it into 2 part, 3 part, or many parts. So there should be a good evaluation measures, evaluation parameter over here. So depending on the various aspect, the measure of the clustering validity can be divided into external index, internal index, and relative index. In case of external index, let's say when we want to apply it on a very small data set, and we already know that this is the desired output, right? So we call it as a cluster purity index, CPI, or entropy, you can use it. So it is applicable only when the true class label for each sample are pre-known. But again, if I am using this type of the data set, then it violates the rule that says that clustering should not have the label data with it. But for experiment purpose, let's say I want to apply it on a given data set of the label data, then I want to see how good or bad this clustering approach is on that. So the evaluation parameter may be your CPI in that. Another parameter is your internal measure. That internal measure may be your sum of the square. It is used to measure the goodness of the cluster structure with respect to the external information. And we can also compare two clustering approaches based on this. The internal measure may be your cohesion, means the compactness between the given objects, and separation. So it measures how distinct a well separated cluster is from the another cluster using the square error. So based on these, we can combine these together in a Shilloid coefficient. Shilloid coefficient combine the idea of both this separation and cohesion, and based on this parameter, I can say that it is a good clustering approach or not. Shilloid coefficient can also be used to identify the best possible number of the clusters given in the data set. The another parameter is the Dion index, and it is the ratio of the smallest distance between the observations not in the same cluster to the largest intra-cluster distance. So these are some of the parameters based on which we can say how good or bad my particular clustering approach is, right? So the research aspect in the unsupervised learning technique that we discussed so far is that we need to see what is the best possible number of the cluster. So still it's a research problem, open research problem where you can contribute. And the another way is that because it's all depend on the first cluster in case of k-mean specifically, then there should be some optimal way to select the first cluster head, because if I have selected the first cluster head optimally, then it will converge to the final state very easily, right? So let's see how we can apply this in the medical field. Right? In medical, I am talking about specifically the human gait, human motion. So human gait is the way of achieving the movement from one position to another position. There are different variants. You can walk, you can jump, run. All these are form of human gait only. This is very important because average adult takes 5,000 to 8,000 steps a day, and it is a common process for us, natural process for us. But its importance can only be felt when there is some difficulty in that, right? So The research associated with the mechanism of human body during this moment locomotion to recognize explicitly the deviation from the normal gait pattern is known as human gait. Now, there are certain parameters that we can extract in the gait analysis. It is similar to your heartbeat, right? The parameters that we considered in case of gait analysis are stride. It's the initial contact of the first limb to the next limb. Then we have the steps, is the initial contact of one limb to the initial contact of the another limb. Cadence is the number of the step per minute. Then when both feet touches the ground, it's known as the double limb support and single limb support. And this is a repetitive cycle, right? So we call that as a gait cycle. So this gait in a single gait cycle, as you can see in this diagram, it consists of the two phases. 60% of the time is the instance phase, and other is the swing phase. These are the technical things in the gait analysis. So in case of instance phase, we can again divide that into 5 subphases and 3 subphases and swing phases. Why these phases are important? Because based on these phases, we can say that which particular muscle is responsible for the pain. If we specifically identify that which particular instance phase is wrong, right? So earlier the doctors, they used to go with the surgery only, but now by looking at the gait pattern, by analyzing this gait cycle, they can identify, okay, this is the problem, so you need to perform this particular exercise and like that, right? So this gait has various applications. One is in the rehabilitation. It can help you to make the robots walk as well. I can make some prosthetic leg. I can use it in as a gait biometrics. For older care person, I can also use it. In games also, this gate can be applied to evaluate the performance of an player. If, let's say, I want to know that if I keep on balling like this, right, then after 2 or 3 years, there may be some issue with my hand or this particular bone. So that also I can identify using this gait analysis. Even it helps in your walking or the running, sprinting games. Gait analysis can be used for analysis the normal study for the older care person, right? To compare the gait parameters before and after the observation, and in case of biometrics as well. So using different machine learning technique, I can apply it for the disorder detection, event detection, the prosthetic control. I can use the fuzzy for it. This unsupervised learning can also be used for clustering the disorders based on the parameters. We can identify the multiple gait disorder that are there, right? So these are the various methods. So we also apply the clustering based approaches on the cerebral palsy disease. So we try to develop a model that can assess the doctor in diagnosis, assessment, and evaluation of the treatment outcome of a cerebral palsy subject. So what we try to do, from the data set, we took the data set from one paper. There were 88 subjects or patients with the cerebral palsy in that, and 68% was normal patients, normal children. And the parameters that we consider was the leg length, the age, the stride length, and the cadence. Then based on that, we first plot the data. So as I told you that it should not be like that, we directly applying the any algorithm that we know. So first we plot the data, and then we try to see that what is the nature of this data. Can we directly apply some algorithm, or I need some pre-processing in that? Right. So we try to normalize it, and then we consider 5 cases in it, that based on the stride length, cadence, lag length, and age, the normalization we applied, the scaling we applied. So in this way, total there were 5 cases, and we have applied the unsupervised learning mixed with the optimization algorithm. So k-mean clustering approach can be remodified using this evolutionary or optimization algorithms. For example, we have applied GA, PSO, uh, and combination of the GA and the k-mean, and we evaluate that on different parameters: cluster purity index, intercluster pure distance, intercluster distance, mean square error, Shillard coefficient, or Dune index. And then based on this, we also try to identify that what should be the best possible number of the clusters in it, right? Using these different evaluation parameters. So we take the share of all of these MSE, your Shillard coefficient, Dune index, and then it says that 5 number of the clusters that are possible in this is the best possible number of the group for this data set. So accordingly, we applied it on the data set, and we test it for some test subjects. A and B were the test subjects who were normal in that case. C and D, they undergo the surgery. So we try to identify that what is the effect of the surgery on that particular person. So the for first and second, the first was able to for the first subject, we were able to give the correct answer that okay, yes, this is a normal. This cluster 5 is the normal one. And for group 2, it was giving cluster 2 as the best result. Then we try to analyze that why this particular uh, problem was there, because it should give cluster 5. But then we realized that the age of this subject B was 19, while in the normal range we have the age from 2 to 13 only. Because of that, because the data set that we were having in that, this was an exception. So because of that, this cluster 4 was prominent in that case. When we applied in on cluster on the subject 3 and subject 4, then by the end of the surgery, after 3 year or 2 year post surgery, in both the cases, they shifted earlier. You can see that they belongs the data set or this particular person, the features, gate features belongs to the cluster 4. But by the end of the 3rd year, my subject behavior lies in a good pattern, that is the cluster 5. Same is the case with D5. So this is the way that can be used, that can assist the doctors to identify the progress of their treatment, right? So this is how we can also apply the clustering techniques for our specific application. So I would say the validation of the clustering structure is the most difficult part in case of clustering analysis. So algorithm develop may give best result with one of the data set, may fail or give poor result with the, another data set. So it is very specific to the data set, because this whole clustering based approaches, they are the data driven. So with this, I end my session. Now it is open for the questions. Any doubt?
I would like to ask one question.
Yes.
How we can decide the number of cluster if it is defined initially? Is there some approaches there by which we can define the default number of cluster or the optimal number of clusters?
Initially, we have to take a random guess if we are unaware of the uh, number of the clusters, if we don't have any expert in that particular field. Let's say I start with 2, then I keep on increasing these numbers. And the evaluation parameter that I consider over here was the Shillite coefficient, Dune index. Right, so same case happened with our data set as well. So we use these evaluation parameter, and then we take a share of all these evaluation parameters. Then we go with the majority. So we consider these 3 aspects: mean square error, then Shillite coefficient, and the Dune index. And if let's say 2 are saying that the best possible number of the clusters, and that is 4, then we go with 4. So that's why I told you that this is an open research area to find the optimal number of the clusters in a given data set.
Another question is, don't you think it says the time complexity is too much in this way?
Yes, it definitely, but in case of the clustering based approaches, it work on the offline data set. So at the end, we need to take the help of some expert. So I guess in that way, if it is giving you good output, so that can be compensated. But still, we have a lot of scope so that this time can be reduced.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Sir, what are the dendrogram you have developed here? You take that criteria you do fixed here, the distance criteria. Suppose if you develop that dendrogram, take to the criteria of that area. What are the things you assigned here, MA and NI? If you instead of taking the distance, smaller distance we're taking, then merging that and find that things. Then
Yes,
if
yes.
you take that area as the criteria,
Hmm.
sir, that will see also help me in order to develop the dendrogram.
Actually, if you want to use it for some other application, let's say I want to apply this clustering approaches on the NLP based problem. Um, I guess all of us are aware of the Google News. So in Google News, they make the groups of the same type of the news in one particular heading, right? So
Yes.
how they does that? They can use the distance parameter. Another is we can use the cosine similarity as well.
Yes.
Cosine similarity actually helps you to understand the similarity again.
Uh, Sir, now the question is come to mind. Then this dendrogram approach can be help in order to find out any medical or clinical approach for the
Yes,
patient of sepsis.
it can be used this dendrogram method because this give you a flexibility that what should be the number of the clusters. Graphically, you can also see that okay, if I use 2 level, then these are the data points that are there. But if I am having larger data set at that time, it is not visually helpful at that time. That's why it has certain limitation as well, but maybe possible that it may work for your particular application.
Actually, sir, actually, once upon a time we are dealing with the CP patient. That
Okay.
in order to find out the inherent characteristics of a CP is very difficult because we are
Yes, sir.
actually working in the field of DHLS, that is the hearing language problem patients. We are dealing with that thing, but in order to find out the inherent characteristic of CP patient is quite difficult.
Yes.
So at that last presentation, what are the things that is very interesting, but I am unable to get. So this is a difficult task on my part. So that is a lot of questions come to my mind. So please give your number, then I will ask you in that in your leisure time. Then I clear a lot regarding the same, sir. If you
So
help me.
in the cerebral palsy, the data set that we were having, in that, yes, there are a lot of parameters that can be used, but the expert they have identified. That's why I have talked about the basic terminologies in the gait analysis. So cadence is there, number of the steps a particular person walk, and the stride length. All these are the technical thing with respect to this gait analysis that can be applied in the cerebral palsy. So we tried with 4 parameters, and then we applied the different algorithms on it. Similar to that, in your problem also, you need to identify, because you are working on that particular problem for long. So you know that what are the parameters that can be used, because that you need to identify yourself, either from the literature or from some expert, basically the doctors, because they know that these are the main parameters that you can take. Yes, if you want to add some more parameter, you can also do so. Then you can analyze that if I add one more parameter, then what is the overall accuracy in that or not. So correspondingly, we can also find what is the importance of that particular parameter in that disease.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
If you have any doubt, you can always mail me at prakash@nitdelhi.ac.in,
C. Prakash.
@nitdelhi.ac.in, or you can Google me. You can get my page as well, web
Yes,
page.
sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Any more question, please, participants? Do you have any more questions? Okay, Dr. Chandra sir will be with us from tomorrow also. So for tomorrow, he is having 2 sessions on tomorrow. So he will be available with us. So if you have any questions, you can ask him tomorrow also. So thank you, Dr. Chandra sir. Thank you for your good presentation and elaborate a lot of things related to even the machine learning and gait analysis. So we will see you again in tomorrow. Thank you very much and good day, you sir.
Thank you, sir.